Okay, and welcome to episode 4 of Zoom In, Women Making Impacts. Today, I've got Kerri Isham here with me, and I'm super excited to have an interview with them because they're knowledgeable, experienced, and passionate educator, a coach and facilitator dedicated to excellence and committed to the empowerment of people of all ages. Her primary goal is to make exploring sexual health fun and meaningful, and to alleviate the shame and embarrassment sometimes associated with this topic. So currently, she's running a company called Power Up Education, and I'm sure a lot of the people watching this have, if they have children, may have encountered you or your company, because I know you're working directly in schools, specializing in sexual health education for preschool and grade 12, up to grade 12. Her main areas of focus are sexual abuse prevention, special needs education, and LGBTQIQAP advocacy. Kerri completed the Sexual Health Educator Certification Program in June 2011 with options for sexual health in Vancouver. And so thank you very much for being here. I think this is, the sexual health education is a key feminist concern, and it's super important now more than ever. And I wanted to say that even on the first page of your website, you have this beautiful, I think it's an image of a grapefruit, and which that's just already very like luscious and sex positive to me, and welcoming. But you also have right under that a tool for tough conversations, how to talk to kids about the differences between real life intimacy and pornography. And I really want to say that I appreciate you putting something like that so up front and center, because like those words are almost like really very difficult for people to even have come out of their mouths, even if they're not talking to children. And I'll say that I grew up in the 80s, and my first encounter with pornography was images and video by the age of 4. And, you know, I've spent a long time thinking about what that means and how that's impacted me. But, you know, that was pre-internet. And, you know, I know the internet's not the only way to access these things, but I can only imagine if it was that easy for me to access that in, say, 1982 or 83, what is it like now in 2021? And I'll say I have a personal investment in this interview because I have a 2-year-old, and I want to raise her in a sex positive home and also keep her safe. So I thank you very much for being here. And I'm sure lots of people will benefit from this interview. So do you mind if we just launch into the first question?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, so I think it would be helpful for everyone if you could just share a brief history of the origins of the formation of Power Up Education, and just remind us of the key services, and then we'll talk a little more deeper.
Sure. So let's see. 2009, I decided to leave a full-time continuing teaching position with School District 69, pension and 100 sick days, to venture off into the entrepreneur world. And so I did that with much trepidation, but I was also super excited about it because I really didn't know the response of people. But I had spent the last 13 years prior to that teaching in middle school. And I taught it from the very first time that I had my own classroom, which was 25 years ago. And I had no idea what I was doing, but I became the person in my school, the go-to person. So I shared my resources. I team taught with people. When I taught physical education, I took the boys because it was boys PE and girls PE. I took the boys, and the male teacher took the girls. And so I think I realized one day that my students never missed my sexual health classes, and they were super engaged. And I felt that the grade 8s that were entering grade 9 really had a really solid foundation. And I wanted to reach further than the students in my school. And so I decided to take the leap of faith. And the first couple of years, I had to do all sorts of different things to piece things together to make enough money to survive. And then about the 4th year, things really started opening up for me. And this is my 13th year this year.
Oh, that's amazing. Congratulations to you for that.
Thank you.
So being an entrepreneur, I think that that was another thing that really drew me to wanting to interview you in this terms of, making impacts, because you are an entrepreneur in addition to being this educator, that really impacts people from the age of 2 all the way to adulthood. And I imagine then, because you're running your own business, there's challenges and opportunities. And I'm just wondering, from an entrepreneurial perspective, if you might share sort of a challenge that you might have overcome, or an opportunity that would be useful to, say, other women who are aspiring to be an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think for me, there was a turning point. I actually had a principal at my school. His name was Don Boyd. And I went into his office, and he used to call everybody kiddo, but not in a meaning, degrading way. He just like, "What's up, kiddo?"
Yeah.
And I said to him, I said, "Don, I think I want to leave teaching, and I want to teach sexual health full time." And his response was, "Of course you should do that." And so then, with the support of someone like that I really looked up to, he was a mentor for many people, I just thought, well, I'm going to do this. And I would also like to say, my daughter's father and I separated when she was 11 months old. And because of his earnings, I was able to take this leap because I know that my bills would be paid. And I think that's really important, because we can all have hopes and dreams, but there's lots of financial restrictions for doing that. And so I really thank my daughter's father for supporting me above and beyond, and my daughter above and beyond, so that I could, like, he has had an impact in me being able to reach people. And I wanted to note that. Yeah, I think in terms of challenges and obstacles, I think working with, I could like you, I couldn't even share some of the stories, but over the last 13 years, there have been tons of barriers. But really the thing that is my hardest challenge and obstacle is when adults are misinformed. My whole business model is educating ourselves, educating our kids. And when I say our kids, I mean the community kids, because lots of people don't have their own children, but still provide that mentoring role.
Yeah.
So the misinformed adults often spread information that sometimes stands as a barrier in my way. And so for me, it's really challenging to understand that, because I can't imagine that there would want anybody in the world that would be okay, a safe person anyways, with children being harmed. So sometimes these people cause me great exhaustion, just trying to do the job that I'm meant to do.
Yeah. And, children inherently, at least to a certain age, trust adult figures, right? So they don't necessarily know that they're receiving that misinformation. And that can be quite confusing to hear different truths, I suppose, coming, or in even language coming from different parents. So I respect that. So again, as we've said, like the student then is really an adult as well as the 2-year-old. And I love this because it also suggests that as an educator, you're a student as well. And we know that language is living and is always changing, and so is research. So I'm just wondering if you could share with us some things you've learned from students themselves, that things that you didn't expect, how that informs your practice, has changed your practice.
Okay. So I love evidence-based research. So I use the Adolescent Health Survey, which came out when I was doing this work, 2008, 2013, and then 2018. And I sort of wait for those studies sort of with great anticipation, because it allows me to hear what more than 30,000 youth in British Columbia feel about a variety of topics. It might be sexual orientation or gender. It might be whether they feel safe at home, their mental health status, things like that. And so I base my lesson plans on directly what the students say. So the year that came out that, 2/3 of kids were, intoxicated in their last sexual interaction, then I created a workshop on consent and the impact of alcohol, right? Kids teach me stuff every day because, of course, I'm going to be 50 in May. So keeping up with the social media stuff is a little bit challenging because I don't use a lot of it myself. I use Instagram, but I don't use TikTok and I don't use Snapchat and things like that. So the kids help me keep in the loop. And I think the question answer time at the end of the class is the most valuable for me, and I think for the students too, although I think my content is interesting. When they get to hear what other kids want to know or what other kids' struggles are, it's really impactful for them. So I learn a lot from them based on the questions they ask me. For example, when I first started, I never really got any questions about pornography. And about 8 years ago, the questions started coming, but very kind of tame, like, what is pornography? Am I a bad person if I look at pornography? And then the questions started getting more escalated and more concerning, to the point where I knew that the majority of the kids in any of my classes either had stumbled upon pornography, were shown pornography by someone, or someone was using pornography as a grooming tool. So the kids, they remind me to keep laughing because some of the things that they say are really funny, and I like to joke around, and puberty is fun. And so I've got all these silly jokes and things like that. And then the kids remember from the year before, and, just opening up a comfortable dialogue and having the same students year after year. I'm not teaching in a lot of schools anymore. I've sort of honed that in. I'm doing more adult training.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of one-on-one with people as well, with FASD and ASD. But, it's a really fun job. And the thing I love about it the most is that the kids are ready. I don't think there's another subject area where the majority of the kids have already bought in before you've gotten there. Whether they say, oh, this is disgusting, I never want to talk about it. And then they're like, interesting. I have full buy-in because everybody has a body.
That's such a great point. Yeah. And that performative aspect of like, oh, but they're listening, and they're always listening. We want to hear this stuff. This one I hadn't planned, but I just wanted to throw this at you. I was reading, it's a bit of an older, like a couple years old article, but it was about the role of nurses in schools and talking about cyberbullying. And it addressed this issue of how certain professionals may have less experience with social media tools. And one of the sort of action plans was talking about the role of the peer educator. And I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on that. Obviously, there's the danger of misinformation, but is there a role that peers can play in the education process of this?
Absolutely. And TikTok actually is providing some really great content. Some of my students will share with me, oh, you should follow. I am on TikTok to see what's on there, but I just don't create my own videos. What am I going to do? Right? A little bit. We'll see. I might do it.
Could be cool.
But yes, absolutely. I mean, one of my goals, long-term goals, is to work with Indigenous youth. Actually, would be my primary focus. I'm doing a group right now with an elder, another Indigenous woman with Kwame Lelam, and myself, and we've developed a course called Eagles Teachings, and it's for kids who are in care, and it focuses on consent and body boundaries and safe, unsafe, secret touch and things like that. So I would love to be a part of something like that, where I could work with Indigenous youth who would then talk to other Indigenous youth, because it still really is quite a taboo topic just because of the impact of residential schools. Yeah. And so absolutely. I know Parksville Qualicum has an entity program, and basically the youth are trained and then hired by public health nurses to then deliver some of the content. They also do like smoking cessation, mental health, but they do have components of sexual health, and that's been around for as long as I can remember, as long as I've been in education. So absolutely, teaching youth under the supervision of an expert is really ideal.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, that's great to know. And I didn't know about that in Parksville. So that's great. I'm sure there'll be some listeners who are aware of that, or might look into that. This is another section I love from your website. So your stated vision for Power Up Education is, quote, to create a world where sexual health education is as natural and habitual as brushing your teeth and combing your hair. We are here to positively impact families and educators, leaving each and every one of you feeling knowledgeable, empowered, and inspired. Certainly my 2-year-old is familiar with brushing teeth and hair, and we're on the path to, dealing or talking about sex and sexual health. Now, I know one barrier to education right now is language for us, but we're working on that, and that's changing every single day. I'm wondering, like, that's such an important goal to like make it as you were mentioning before the interview that, let's have the vagina be as regular in our language as the ear, right? Yeah. How do we get there? And like, what are some of the barriers to communication that we need to overcome to get people to feel comfortable to talk that way?
Well, I think it's really fake it till you make it. I have a lot of parents who say, I just don't really like saying penis. And I just said, well, say it with your son when you are changing his diaper. And usually when we're alone, I mean, when I first started this job, I was using an overhead projector. Like this is,
yes.
Okay, this is like 1996, okay? Overhead projector with the kids with their own booklets labeling the human reproductive parts. And I had to stand in front of the mirror because I even had an awareness back then that if I was silly with the words and I got red-faced with the words, that the students were gonna be silly too. Yeah. So I practiced. And in 1996, I didn't even know the difference between a vulva and a vagina, right? Because everybody called it a vagina, even though we know the outside is the vulva and the inside is the vagina.
Yeah.
I think barriers are, I hate to say this because I never want to put parents, in a poor light, but there is a lack of parent engagement. And so parents are so busy, we're so consumed, we're working, we're doing all these things in the middle of a global pandemic. I really need, the image that comes to mind is the ostrich with the head in the sand. So many parents really, they kind of know what's happening, but they don't want to take that next step of investigation because then it actually means quite a bit of work, right? To support your child and to set filters on the computers and to set time limits because kids do melt down when you set limits. And part of being a parent is setting limits. And if your child melts down, your child melts down. But they'll get over it and they'll find other activities to replace just being online. Prior to COVID, we had kids were online, according to Common Sense Media in 2018, about 8 to 9 hours per day. And so we know that is higher now during COVID. So this is multitasking, this is Snapchatting, this is checking Facebook, this is watching a YouTube video and maybe scrolling through Netflix to see what they want and then texting a friend and then, so they're on there. It is their way of life, but there are some significant dangers out there. So sort of having a lack of awareness of what's really going on. And the reason that I put pornography on my landing page is because it is the bane of my existence. I finally feel I've been trying to talk about pornography for about 8 years. I do talk about with the students, but I just created How to Talk to Children and Youth About Pornography 2 years ago because it was the first time I felt that people were going to be willing to hear what I had to say. So we did a literature, scan of 2018, 2019 to find the most up-to-date research, and it's very alarming. And so the parents who come to these workshops are the parents who are already aware, and I often struggle to figure out how do I get the parents that are not, right? That's the main thing. The red tape is very painful for barriers. I hear things like, well, we don't have the funding for that. I hear things like, well, the teachers just have to teach it. And, the majority of teachers that I've talked to over the last 25 years, I think I have a pretty good pulse of what's going on. Most of them say, we want someone like you to come in and then provide activities that we can do afterwards. And that's why I wrote my 3 books, because I wanted teachers to have a reproducible workbook that was compliant with the curriculum, that was easy, that they could just photocopy and send out to the students. So there's a lot of excuses along the way, even though in British Columbia, our curriculum is mandated from kindergarten to grade 10.
Yeah.
So this is not optional. This is not, well, I didn't really feel like it, because if a teacher decided not to do math for the year,
Yeah.
people would lose their minds. But if a teacher doesn't do sexual health education, unless they have a principal holding them accountable, and of course, for me, this gets me into like some hot water sometimes. I'm a certified teacher. I want to support teachers. They don't have the funding. They don't have the resources. They don't have the support. And they're fearful that the parents are going to be upset with what they're teaching, even though it's part of the curriculum. So we have a little bit of a challenge here. I'm shining light onto, hey, this has to be done. Some people go out of their way to dim the light and to kind of try to get rid of me or push me to the side because they don't want the light shone on the fact that they're not doing what they're mandated to do. Like, this is kind of a liability issue, right? This is a human right issue.
Yep.
And so there's a lot of barriers, let me tell you.
Wow. I wasn't even expecting that perspective, which I really value. Yeah. I was thinking more like around, like, I suppose just, I hadn't thought about the networks, I guess, and the institutional issues that would be behind that. And I mean, I'm an educator too, and I work with adults, young adults, but I always say to them that your mental and physical health is more important than any assignment or grade. And if anything in those departments are impacting you, prioritize that first. We will figure it out some way. And, I think you make a really good point about the easy way in which sexual health education can be marginalized or sidelined, whether it's in the context of parenting or in the education system. And as you said, it's a human right. And also you mentioned, everybody has a body, and it is part of our like survival and well-being to know how to take care of ourselves, to understand how our body works, understand consent. So that centering, the need to center that as an essential core piece. I really respect your advocacy around that. That's very challenging. Okay. And I wanted to also say, you mentioned that you had 3 books that you've written and that you've shared it, as a pedagogical tool. And I noticed that on your website, obviously you're an entrepreneur and this is your business. And so there's modules and classes and various things that you can do and pay for. And then you also have some, free resources. And I think that combination is so important around the sort of, reducing barriers to communication, right? And being able to, like the fact that you said kids can photocopy it and use some of the workbook stuff. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. But I also don't think, this is none of this, you're an entrepreneur, right? And you're doing some really important innovative work. And so I love the way you can traverse these different spaces, I suppose, and share your knowledge. So with this, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but it's a little more of a specific question. How has the forum and content, so the delivery of your education and the content of sexual health education, needed to change to address the needs of the current generation of children and teenagers? And as I mentioned at the top, that, I was exposed to pornography very young, or I stumbled into it, I should say. It wasn't presented to me, but and we know that's existed for a very, very long time. So obviously this is an area to discuss, but I'm just wondering if you can highlight a couple of different areas where you think there's been changes that are needed.
Well, when I started in the consulting world, I thought I was doing kindergarten to grade 10. And then about 8 years ago, I worked with my first family who had a transgender youth. And so it's really important in sexual health education, and any education really, to kind of go with the flow of what's actually happening. And so it was really important for me. I went down to Seattle and I took some training specifically on gender and non-binary people. And that was really important. And then I just started getting an influx of clients who's, I helped some schools in School District 68 to help transition the child socially at school, how to transition in the family, the letter writing to the family or the emails to kind of say that this is who our child is. And if if that doesn't work for you, that's okay, but you will not be able to be involved in our child's life because we're supporting them 100%. So I think just, like I said earlier, the kids question and answer time that we do, that really informs kind of what else is going on out there. Definitely the increase in child viewing of pornography has completely shifted my practice. And so I want to start talking to kids about this as soon as their parents give them a device. So that might be 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. And that's why I wrote my book, The Things We Can't Unsee, How to Talk to Kids About Pornography. It's a children's book about these images. And it was written for the parents to give them a heads up of like, here's some things you need to do. We need to filter. And the young boy goes to his dad because I wanted them, Lindsay Ford and I of Bread and Clutter, we wanted we wanted to model that the dad's involvement is super important here, right, around their values and beliefs around sexuality and how they're treating their wives and the women in their lives as well. And then I think, such a huge need, the students want to be entertained, right? And this is from the video games and the time that they spend online. And I hear this as a challenge for teachers who are trying to teach like regular subject areas, that it's not always fun and games. But for me, I don't do a lesson without a song or a game or a book or an activity. It's kind of like kindergarten, but it's like kindergarten to grade 10. That's kind of my focus, is how can I get the most engagement as possible? Because I know that they're going to learn more from each other than me directly teaching. And there is a time and a place where I do direct teaching, but it's in short stints. And then I want them to do something with this information. So it's really being responsive to the needs of the community. And at 5 years from now, I don't know what the needs are going to be. There's a huge need for me right now to work with youth with FASD, right? And I work with mostly boys, not always, but mostly boys around 16, 17, 18, who are doing things that could get them into trouble with the law. So that's kind of I didn't know that I was going to be doing that when I started this job, but I'm doing a lot of work with Autism BC, MCFD, Child and Youth with Special Needs, working with FASD key workers. So I don't know what, and I think I love that about the job, that I don't know what my job's going to be a year from now or 2 years from now, because who knows where things are going to shift and change.
Oh, that rolls right into the next question, which is like how to promote teachings that reach beyond the cisgender, able-bodied, and let's say even a white student population. And you've mentioned working with Indigenous youth, and you've worked with transgender youth, folks who've suffered with fetal alcohol syndrome. And can you talk just to dig a little deeper and talk a little bit more about the maybe specific strategies that help reach beyond that that lens of the able-bodied, the white cisgender approach to sexual health?
Well, I think I have a personal mandate. There are certain groupings of people that I prioritize over everybody else. And this has just happened the last couple of years. I did a really great course at UBC around respecting Indigenous culture, teachings in the work. Like I have one of the posters behind me, you see, just to familiarize myself. And it was around reconciliation through education. And so this has been a focus. So if I have an opportunity to work with Indigenous youth, I would take that over working with Caucasian youth. I have to be honest. If somebody is neurotypical versus non-neurotypical, I'm going to choose the child who is non-neurotypical, just because I don't have enough hours in the day to help everybody. And I do have other colleagues that do different work. But I'm trying to focus on the most marginalized populations. So I know that my people with diverse needs are 7 times more likely to be sexually exploited. So I'm going to choose to work with them. Indigenous youth are very high risk for sexual exploitation. So for me, that is a priority. And so the professional development development that I do. I just took a course on sexuality after trauma. So I'm trauma informed. I've done a lot of training in trauma the last couple of years. I had no idea that I would even need to do that when I first started doing this, because it didn't even occur to me that anybody in my class 10 years ago would need me to be trauma informed. And so I do a lot of Pro D to be able to upgrade my skills. I do not have any sort of desire at this point in time to do a master's, but I do select Pro D that's going to help me specifically in my field. And then I choose just to surround myself with people that are advocating for the same thing, right? Autism BC, I've been working with them for a long time. I work with MCFD all over the island. Yeah. They know kind of what my training is about. And so, yeah, it's just really important to give voice to people that don't have a strong voice. And so I've been really more interested in like all sorts of movements. Black Lives Matter, I got involved with that, and just, highlighting people that don't have the same opportunities.
And so how this is sort of a follow-up, but how do you promote yourself, or how do you, like, it sounds like you've got long-term relationships with some of these communities and organizations now. How, for somebody who might be working on with their business or education and wanting to reach marginalized communities, like, what are those steps to start to create and build relationships with communities that it does take time to build trust and intimacy, and so what was some of the things that, how did you start to reach out, I suppose, and make yourself known and trusted?
Yeah, usually it's a person that's already established in a community that would reach out to me. So one of my communities I've been going there, I think, for 11 years, and I usually go up twice a year. And the relationship building is the most key aspect. A lot of Indigenous communities see like a high turnover of staffing. When you talk about something as, challenging as child sexual abuse in a community or sexual assault, you need to be there on a regular basis. So in this community, I get their newsletter. So I know what's happening in the community when I'm not there. I have a ton of the people in the community on Facebook, and I comment on their posts. And when they're struggling, I give them a little positive something or other. Yeah. Tell them that they're valuable. And I think during COVID, it's very difficult to relationship build via Zoom, but I know it takes one person who has a vision. So I have a gal, her name's Nadine, from up north in Vancouver Island, and we just put on a course called Creating a Culture of Child Protection. And she did her very best to advertise and to get the word out, and she really was expecting like 5 or 6 people. We had 41 people on the Zoom call. And so these are from very remote Indigenous communities, and she was so excited. And once you get a positive thing like that happening, it just starts the ball rolling. And then other communities say, hey, we would like you to do your Facebook Live Body Smart program in our community like you're doing in Coahuila. Yeah. And or we would like you to reproduce this thing for our puberty age kids. And so once they see me once, I'm very tender-hearted, and people know that about me, and I'm a huge empath. So in my workshops at the end, when I'm thanking people for coming, it is quite often that I will get a bit teary-eyed, and I want people to understand, like, this is my life's calling. So this is as authentic as you get. I want people to know that they have my trust, that I will earn their trust and be there on a regular basis for that community. But of course, I can't be that for everybody. So I have to choose certain communities. Yeah. And it's the communities that already have a very empowered leader that want things to move forward in their community for the safety of their kids.
Yeah, I've seen you at various events, and we're like acquainted at a distance, but I just have always, you radiate that passion and that investment, and you can just tell. The first conversation I think I had with you, I could just see that passion, and I think it's really helpful to remind people that that's a process of trust building, community building, and also that whole issue of not being able to extend yourself across every community. And that's an ethical decision to make for yourself in terms of self-care, but also in terms of making sure that those relationships that you do have are strong. And I hear you on the Zoom thing, the challenges of it, but also the importance of it with remote communities and how you get to bring that education to places that might not have access to that. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much for that. So another community that you've been reaching out to, and I don't actually know sort of the historical context of this for you, but in the last couple of months, I've really been seeing you on social media, speaking out specifically around issues of homelessness. And on your website, you do say that sexual health includes social, emotional, spiritual, physical aspects of sexuality and relationships. And I think this is a feminist way of thinking about the relationship between sexual health and the other aspects of our health. But also, we know that people who are experiencing insecure housing or do not have secure housing at all are going to be more likely to encounter sexual violence. So I see those connections implicit in your efforts to reach out, but I've seen you gathering so many resources and materials and working on the front line and trying to get those to people who've been displaced from the fires recently in the last couple of months and so on. So I'm just wondering if you can just tell us a little more about, I guess, what inspires you to get involved in that, what sort of motivates you to speak out on this?
Well, I think it was modeled. My mom was somebody who did a lot of outreach. She worked for victim services as a volunteer. She always helped families at Christmas time. And so I've always been an advocate for people who have been less advantaged, I guess. My earliest recollection is grade 4. I remember the girl's name. Her name was Lisa, and the kids were really mean to her and just sticking up for people. And I think because of COVID, I've been working with people who have been unhoused since my mid-20s in some capacity, whether it was through SPUDs, whether it was finding clothing, whatever. But when Wesley Street was displaced, that took it to a whole different level for me, because I really feel that everything that was done was against the people that were living there and their human rights. And so I've done a lot of reading. I've read the proposal for the city. I've read the human rights aspects around people who are unhoused. And so it was really actually not really a choice to help out to the level, but like a calling, because if you ask my husband, I wasn't able to sleep some nights just thinking about people, having my day based on whether it was raining. This is going to be a good day because it's sunny and the unhoused people are not going to have all their stuff wet. Like that was kind of, so I got really submersed for about 2 months, and the community really showed up, and I thought, I need to use my name and my good standing in the community to reach out and get help. And I don't know how many times I've filled my van and my trailer, sleeping bags and clothes and boots and things like that. And people have been really responsive in a challenging situation, because you have to give knowing that those things will likely end up in the landfill or likely end up in the forest, because they don't have a way to dry out and wash their clothing. And so for me, I got involved with SIA, I got involved with Wisteria, I got involved with Open Heart. And basically I just text them, what do you need? I put it on Facebook, and by the next day or the day after that, I have the supplies that they need. And so it's really helped me feel a part of the community at a time where, as an extrovert, feeling very cut off from my people. And so even just having a quick exchange of, thank you so much, we're going to get this stuff out tonight, we really appreciate it, the help has been more for me and my mental health. Yes, I'm helping other people, but just to feel like I'm doing something and not sitting at home in my warm home, eating my food from my full fridge and having all the benefits of being, a middle class Caucasian woman with many advantages. I've never slept outside, and I don't even think I would last one night. And I've had some very deep and meaningful conversations with people that brought both of us to tears. And so looking at the the human piece of a person who is unhoused, is this is someone's brother or sister, this is someone's child. These are people that are, immersed in trauma and addiction and mental health challenges, and maybe they lost their job. Like, there's so many things, and it literally breaks me when I hear people referring to them as subhuman.
Yeah.
I don't read the comments anymore, because I'm just trying to put a Band-Aid on things that will shift and change. We have housing 2021, 2022 coming. It's not helpful for the people that are unhoused right now. And I wish that we had a better response to what happened at Wisteria, because we knew that was coming. We had Tent City as an example. We knew what was happening. And I think the city acted very quickly and not rationally to supporting the people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you think is sort of, if this is off the cuff, but I guess what do you think is a dominant misconception, I suppose, about people who end up in a situation of being unhoused? Because I've seen those comments. I do read them mainly because I want to know what the ignorance seems to be. But like, what do you think the misconception, what is something you come up against a lot?
Well, I think they compartmentalize everybody into the same mold. Mm-hmm. So everybody's a thief. Mm-hmm. Everybody who's unhoused is an addict. Everybody has mental health issues. And I'm happy to see that the housing proposals that they're doing are for different needs. Yeah. Right? So do we put a person with addiction issues in the same building as someone who just has mental health issues? Or, right? So looking at how can we best support these people? Mm-hmm. I think I hear a lot, they're not contributing members of society. Mm-hmm. They are fine living on the streets. And it's like, for me, when I try to interact in a sort of a light, fun way. And I remember having a conversation with one of the guys. I had a bunch of underwear, and he was like, "Oh, well, I'm commando," or no, he said, I don't wear underwear. I'm like, "Oh, commando." And so we just had this like 1 minute exchange where we both had a good giggle or whatever. And then across the street, I go over and I see one of my students that went to a District 68 school using drugs off of the staircase with a friend. And he recognized me. He said, "Kerri Isham, you were my sex ed teacher." And I just, like, my heart literally shattered all over the ground, because I was thinking, what happened to this young man that it is safer for him to be on the streets than at home? Because he is my daughter's age. He's about 20, 21 years old. And I'm thinking, something is really wrong here. And so offering someone a tube, or offering hand warmers, or offering boots, or offering a scarf or a warm jacket. Like, my car is full right now and I have to go down today. I think I'm going to head to Parksville though, because on the news at St. Edmund's Church, one of the outreach workers has just taken responsibility to start a little something for people where they can bring their tent. And the 30-year-old man that they mentioned was one of my students when I taught in Parksville. And he's 30 years old now, and he's homeless. He's been homeless for a long time because of active addiction, right? Yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, I can also take my supplies to Parksville because I lived there for a very long time. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I mean, I just think we all need to do our part. Yes, some people who were on the streets got off the streets, and I find those people sometimes to be the most judgmental of the people that are still on the street. It's kind of like when you quit smoking and you're like, oh, everybody, this is so easy, but it isn't easy. I don't smoke, but I've heard it's not easy. Yeah. But I just think, when you have not even had one conversation with the person who's unhoused, I don't think you have sort of any say in who they are as people. Mm-hmm.
That's such a good point. I was just thinking about how there are folks that are really unsympathetic who are like, well, I got through it. Everybody else should too. And then the danger of it sometimes is that they become a spokesperson for that experience. And then people who are already maybe misinformed and unsympathetic will say, well, look, they're the authority on this. And I think you're pointing to the fact that every single person is complex. They have their own complex histories. Nobody plans to be unhoused, or as they say, nobody really plans to be addicted to drugs or have a mental illness. And so, yeah, taking those small daily actions to just actually acknowledge that other person is definitely an important step. And I just appreciate, I don't know, you've really shown some leadership that's inspired me, and I'm still thinking about it and figuring out what I can do. And I think it's going to be a lifelong process. I plan to stay in an IMO. So I think, working with people here is going to be something I'll commit to. On a lighter note, I guess the last question I had for you was how to make sex education fun for everyone. And you've sort of kind of gestured towards it a few times already, and the commando underwear is a good good thing that's going to stick with me after this. But as you said, it's uncomfortable for people, and I'm also thinking a little bit too about how sometimes parents are not just awkward or uncomfortable with talking about these things, but they're carrying with them histories that are complicated as well. So what are some specific daily strategies for making it fun that we can kind of walk away as sort of like tools in our toolbox to lighten the mood on this topic?
I think we need to start early, because little people, everything is wonderful. Everything is incredible. And so when we start early with them and we get them on board, books are a really great way. I have actually in my free resources on my website, I have 3 different book lists for different age groups of my top recommended books. We need to speak about this often and make it about dinner time conversation, car conversation, camping conversation, and not long talks necessarily, although sometimes that's what they may want, but like short sprinkles of information, or you hear about something that's happening in the schools and you say, hey, tell me, is that happening in your school? What do you know about that? And jokes are always great. I do have my signature. I have my testicle jokes. I have my pubic hair jokes. I have my penis and vulva model stuffy things. I have cliched breasts. So I have all these things that people know me for. And so if a child hasn't seen me for a while, but then I pull out my anatomically correct dolls, they're like, I know that lady. Or if I do this interesting, which is what I do with the little people, K to 3, for them to know that body scientists don't say ooh or gross or yuck. And this is a concept board by Meg Hickling. And the kids, the little gal that I had in here the other day, she was like, interesting, like every time I was saying something. So it's a tool for her parents to use outside, right? Yeah, and sexual health education can be really fun, and it's heavy too. So making light of certain things or coming up with funny things to say, I find, especially during puberty time, the bodies are changing. I talk about the 3 different types of families. Like family 1 is like, ew, we don't talk about it. Family 2 is like, cool, and that's all they say. And then family 3 is like, yeah, let's make a big bowl of popcorn, sit down, tell me all about it, leave nothing out. And then I can get a quick scan from the students. Where are they at? Some kids like, I don't know. We never even talked about this, so I don't even know if we're a 1, 2, or 3. And then some kids like, yeah, 3. My parents never stopped talking about it. And it just gives me a quick understanding of where the students are coming from.
Yeah.
And there's so many great video resources. I am in love with amaze.org. I have to say, they're the very best videos that I've ever found, and they're super accessible. I can show those videos for kindergarten all the way, there's a junior version, kindergarten to grade 10, because they have some very hilarious videos about masturbation, or they have funny videos about puberty. Then they have some serious topics like what is cisgender, what is gender nonconforming, sexual orientation, like every single topic. And they have a team of I would love to work with them. Oh my gosh. Team of very committed professionals to bring top quality videos that are inclusive. And they have a very wide variety of people of different nationalities and backgrounds. And so it just brings and gender, sexual orientation, just brings a good flavoring to the videos.
Well, those are a variety of resources, and I think if in consultation with you, obviously we'll have your website linked on the webpage for this video, but maybe a couple of additional, just quick to see on the page,
Sure.
references and things so that people can get started on this. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing your Friday morning with me and with us, and thank you for everything that you continue to do. And I know lots of people know who you are in the community, but it never hurts to have these nice hour-longish sessions where we can chat it out. So I hope to see you in
Thank you so
person
much.
again sooner than later, but
Me
otherwise
too.
take care, and thank you for everything.
Thank you, Melissa.
Okay, bye-bye.